Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Laura Kushner-Key, the executive editor of Understood, and I'm so excited for today's webinar. Today's webinar is going to be really fun. It's called Quiz Show, Test Your Knowledge of Learning and Attention Issues. And guiding us through the quiz today is my esteemed colleague, Andrew Lee, an editor for the website. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks. Well, what a great introduction. Again, today we're doing a little quiz show just to see what you guys know about learning and attention issues. We're going to focus really on myths, and we're going to try to go through and do 10 true or false questions. So what we'll do is we'll post each of these questions on the screen. We'll give you a chance to answer, and then we're going to come back and tell you what the answer is. And after that, if you have any questions during the quiz show, definitely type them on screen. We'll try to address them. So let's get started. Here's the first question. Question number one, and this is a pretty common, I think, a misconception that people have. True or false? Learning and attention issues are not common. I'm going to read that one more time. And true or false? Learning and attention issues are not common. And then if you're at home, jot your answer down. I'm going to turn it over to Laura. So what's the answer to this question, Laura?
So the answer to this question is false, because learning and attention issues are actually much more common than you may think. Although those of you in our audience today might be aware of this, a lot of people who aren't familiar with learning and attention issues might not realize that 1 in 5 people have learning and attention issues. That's 20%. That's a very substantial number. Andrew, what do you think about that?
I mean, it is very common, and I think that on our site we actually have a couple really interesting infographics that break the numbers down from our experts. We have ADHD by the numbers, dyslexia by the numbers. So if you're interested in sort of the hard facts around that, definitely go to the site and check that out. So I hope you guys got that one correct. Let's go to our second question. And remember, keep track of how many questions you get right and wrong, so that at the end you can really evaluate sort of where you are in terms of your knowledge. So here's question number 2. True or false? Learning and attention issues are related to how intelligent a person is. I'm going to say that one more time. We'll keep the card up there. True or false? Learning and attention issues are related to how intelligent a person is. So jot down your answer, and then let's go to Laura. And Laura, this is a common thing people often wonder about. What's the answer here?
So the answer is definitely false. They are not related to how intelligent a person is. But again, this is a really big misconception in the community at large. A lot of people confuse learning and attention issues with, for example, intellectual disabilities, and they're not the same thing. Kids with learning and attention issues tend to have average to above average intelligence. In fact, it's just a very common misconception that people have.
I really think that's true. I mean, I think outside of people who don't have experience with kids with learning and attention issues often make this mistake. It was really interesting. I heard a story about David Boies, who is really sort of the top lawyer in the United States. I mean, he's argued in front of the Supreme Court. He's well known in the nation's capital, and he has dyslexia. And he actually has someone who helps him during his cases because he's really good at sort of big picture thinking. He has someone help him through his cases in finding the documents. So this is definitely a big misconception, and it's a really important one, I think. So I'm hoping. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to chime in really quickly and say that we have a lot of great information on the website about famous entrepreneurs and celebrities who have learning and attention issues. Very highly intelligent people, much like your child could very likely be. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Absolutely. So let's go on to the next question. We're going to get a little tougher. This is question 3. So remember, at your home, jot down which ones you've got right and wrong. This is question 3. True or false? ADHD is a learning disability. So true or false? ADHD is a learning disability. Okay, so this is a little bit tougher, right, Laura? What would you say about this?
Well, everybody have your answer written down before I give it away. The answer to this question is false. ADHD is not a learning disability, although ADHD can interfere with learning. Now, there's a lot of, there might be some misconceptions around this because of how common it is for children to have a learning disability and have ADHD. The number is about roughly 1/3 of kids with learning disabilities will also have ADHD. There's also a really important legal distinction between what we're calling a learning disability here. And Andrew, you definitely have expertise here. Maybe you can explain that.
And that's true. When we're talking about sort of learning and attention issues, we're not necessarily talking about a legal word. We talk about learning disability or disability in general. It has a very specific meaning in the law. So when someone is trying to get services at their school, there's different ways to qualify for those services, and the laws use different words. So learning disability, specific learning disability, is actually a category in the main special education law that may get you services in school. And ADHD actually falls under a different category called other health impairment. So the words really do matter, but the answer to this one, as Laura said, is that ADHD is not a learning disability. So let's go on to the next question. Again, we're gonna do a little bit questions that are a little harder. Question number 4: true or false? Learning and attention issues can run in families. So I'm going to keep that up for a little bit longer. That slide. Question number 4: learning and attention issues can run in families. At home, jot your answer down. I'll give you a moment. And now we'll throw it over to Laura. What's the answer to this one?
So the answer to this one is true. They can run in families. We still have a lot of research to do in this area, but it's been seen that genes and heredity can cause learning and attention issues. For example, for every child who has dyslexia, there's about a 40% chance that he or she will have another family member who has features of dyslexia as well. So there's definitely a hereditary component here, but again, there's still a lot of research to be done.
Wow, that's really interesting. Actually, I was just talking to one of our community moderators. She does in the Teen Talk group, and she said that dyslexia had affected 4 generations of her family. So from her daughter to herself to her mother to her grandmother. So I can really see how that can run in families really plays out in people's lives. So let's go to the next question, question number 5. Again, this is actually a very tough question. I'm going to read it aloud. True or false? Dyslexia is more common in boys than in girls. I'm going to go read it one more time with the card up there. Question number 5. True or false? Dyslexia is more common in boys than in girls. So let's give you a moment because I know this one might give people a little bit of pause. And then over to Laura for what the answer.
Yeah, this definitely is really interesting. It's all about how you talk about it too, right? So the answer to this question is false. Dyslexia is not more common in boys than in girls. However, some people might shake their heads at that and think, well, I've heard that boys are identified more often with learning and attention issues than girls are. And that is true. Boys will be more often identified with ADHD, with learning disabilities than girls will. But just because they're identified with learning and attention issues, that doesn't mean that they have them more often in girls. So what we see here is an issue of noticeability, we can call it. Research has shown that, for example, boys with ADHD will attract more negative attention in school. So when that happens, a teacher may be more likely to say, let's get your child evaluated, let's see what we can do about it. What ends up happening is this disproportionate amount of identification. It's a really interesting topic. Again, lots more research to be done here. We have a great Q&A coming up on the website on Tuesday from our expert, Bob Cunningham. He's going to explain it more, so be on the lookout for that.
So let me just clarify that, because the question was about dyslexia being more common in boys than in girls, but you're saying that that's also true, that myth, I guess, is also true for ADHD, right?
Yes, that's true. Sorry, and I did lump them all together, and you'll see in the Q&A that we have coming up on Tuesday that it is about dyslexia, it is about ADHD. The numbers might be different between issues, but the main idea remains the same. Thank you for clarifying that.
Great. So let's bring up the next question. Question number 6? Again, another tough question. Well, maybe not so tough if you have a lot of experience in this area, but many parents might just be getting started, and maybe you've come just because you want to learn a little bit more. So let's try this one out. Question number 6. True or false? there is medication to treat learning issues like dyslexia and dysgraphia. And we're going to keep that card up so you can look at that again, and I'm going to read it aloud. True or false, there is medication to treat learning issues like dyslexia and dysgraphia. So I think this is an area, Laura, that a lot of people are confused about. What's the answer on this one?
So the answer to this one is false. There is no medication to treat learning issues like dyslexia and dysgraphia. Now, many of us know that medication can be helpful for ADHD, but again, as we know, since we learned earlier in the quiz, ADHD is not a learning disability. They're separate issues. But just because there's no medication available for learning issues like dyslexia and dysgraphia doesn't mean that there aren't many ways that we can help kids who have these issues. Kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia can be very successful with the help of accommodations like assistive technology, through different types of therapy and interventions.
Great, Laura. That's really an important thing to point out, that there are different ways to work with learning issues. And we've got a lot of information on the site. I can bring up an article here. This is just an example of specialists who work with kids with learning and attention issues. So, aside from medication, there's many other ways, many other professionals who actually can help. So let's go to the next question, and we'll bring that one up there. This is question number 7. I hope you guys are keeping track at home, because we are going to just run through our answers at the very end and see how you did. This is question number 7. So true or false? It's a little bit of a long one. Here we go. Schools must provide special education services to all students who struggle with learning and attention issues. That's a lot to say. I'll try that again. Schools must provide special education services to all students who struggle with learning and attention issues. And I'll let you think about that for just a moment. And I'm going to turn over to Laura. Is this, the question about services and who's eligible, is this a question we see that comes up with a lot of parents?
Oh, absolutely. And you can ask our community moderators. They get this question all the time. So there are some points to clarify here. The answer here is false. Schools do not have to provide services for all children who are struggling with learning and attention issues. The children have to qualify for the special education services first. And this is a legal distinction again. And Andrew, I'm actually going to kick it back to you to explain the evaluation and eligibility process a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So the card, it says, and it's a little bit of a tricky question for this reason, it says, schools must provide special education services to all students who struggle with learning and attention issues. Now, again, when we talk a lot about the terminology, it can be really confusing. And when we talk about the law focuses on a word which a lot of people don't like, but the word is disability. And so not every child with learning and attention issues is going to qualify for special education services. There's a whole eligibility test that's actually, in some cases can be a little bit complicated, but the most important thing is to go through the process. So, if you request a formal evaluation, that's going to be from your school. If you're in a public school, that's going to bring up this process and bring up the question of eligibility. But it's important to know that it's not every child, but and that there's an eligibility standard. Again, it's like one of those questions that's tough to know if you're a parent. You're looking in and you're thinking, well, is it my child? And it's really like a legal test that has to be done by the school. And of course, parents have a big say in that, advocates too. But it's something that has to go through that process. So let's go to the next question. This is question number 8. And I'm going to read this one aloud. Again, a very, very tough question. So if you don't get this one right, don't fret. True or false? A classroom accommodation changes what your child is expected to learn in school. We'll try that again. True or false? A classroom accommodation changes what your child is expected to learn in school. So I'll give you a moment on that one, and then we're going to throw it over to Laura for the answer.
Yeah, definitely a tricky question. And there's one word here that will really clarify the answer, which I'll give you in just a minute, but let me read it again. A classroom accommodation changes what your child is expected to learn in school. So the word what is the key word here. And the answer is actually false, because a classroom accommodation doesn't change what your child is expected to learn, doesn't change the curriculum for your child. It changes how your child is expected to learn. There are lots of different examples of accommodations, but just to give you more of the terminology here, the thing that would change what your child is expected to learn is a modification. So Andrew, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And I know that we have a great article on the site that clarifies this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, this is actually, I think the best way to understand accommodations is actually to go and look at sort of what some of the accommodations are. So if we go to the site and we bring out, let's go to the next tab. These are sort of a set of infographics that we have on the site about accommodations. An accommodation is really not about what your child is learning, it's about how they're learning, as you mentioned. And if common accommodations like technology, like a little bit extra time on a classroom test, sitting in a certain spot, those don't really change what your child is expected to learn. If it's a history class, they still need to know George Washington. So that's what an accommodation is. A modification is a little bit different. A modification changes what your child is expected to learn. So in the history class, if your child is, for whatever reasons, is not able to learn, history facts, that would be a modification, and that's a lot more controversial. But there's a distinction between the two. So in that class, an accommodation might be extra time on the test. A modification might be, well, on the test, your child doesn't need to learn about certain facts or figures about history. So that's an important distinction, and it's one that comes up a lot, I think, with parents. But for accommodations in particular, those are things that can give your child the ability to learn everything that all of their children are learning. So that's the distinction. Great. So let's try go to the next question. Question number 9, and this let me read it aloud. True or false? IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. Let me read it again. True or false? IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. And now this is a word that a lot of people will have heard before, know about, but sometimes they're a little confused about. So jot down your answer, and then we're going to throw it over to Laura for the answer.
Yeah, I think some of the confusion. So the answer here is true. That is what it stands for. Some of the confusion stems from a lot of people will sub in the word plan for the word program, and the official term is actually Individualized Education Program. That's really all there is to say about this particular question, although we get so many questions in our community and social media about IEPs, because it can be tricky territory to navigate. So, but I have a question related to terminology for Andrew. Can a state call it something different, or is this a federal term?
That's a really good question, because state laws in a lot of areas do change, let me back up. Federal law sort of lays a level at which everybody has to provide. So when we talk about the word Individualized Education Program, that's part of federal law. So you're not going to see that term change in schools when you're dealing with special education. You might see other things change where states have more freedom, but that's something that pretty much every parent who is interested in this area should see. So that word doesn't change. Actually, and then the word Individualized Education Program, some people might say Individualized Education Plan, and that's not the right word, but it is right in the sense that this is really a plan for your child's special education experience. So in some ways, that's that the term program isn't so intuitive, but it is actually a plan for your child's educational experience. So let's go to our last question, question number 10. That's another good question. True or false, an IEP can include assistive technology? We've been talking a bit about assistive technology as an accommodation. So the question is, true or false, an IEP can include assistive technology? Laura, what's the answer on this one?
Well, let me give our folks at home example, or at work, if you're doing this from work, some examples of assistive technology before I give the answer, and maybe that will tip it off a little bit. So assistive technology are any tools or devices that can help assist with learning. So for example, text-to-speech software, spell check, even a calculator is considered assistive technology. So think that over a little bit. And the answer is actually true. An IEP can most definitely include assistive technology for your child that can help your child be even more successful in school.
Cool. That's a really good thing to know, I think, for parents that, that the IEP actually there's a lot of options there, a lot of things. The IEP team can determine a lot of what can happen. And we have some great information on the site about assistive technology basics, just examples, tools, who decides on the assistive technology. That's a really good thing to know how that process works. So, questions. And I think that's a really great final question. Let's back up a little bit. I hope you guys have been keeping track at home, how many you've got right and wrong. And let's bring up our scorecard. Not to worry about this, but we just want to give you a sense of maybe where what you need to look at it if you've gotten some right or some wrong. So how'd you do? If you got 8 to 10 correct, I think, wow, great job. You really know your way around learning attention issues, and a lot of parents or experienced are obviously going to be in this area. If you got 5 to 7 correct, well done. I think that one thing you could do is look at the questions that you got wrong and go take a look at them and maybe read up a little bit more about them on the site. If you got 4 or less correct, I think there's a really useful part of the website that you might want to look at, and it's called the Getting Started section. So if we bring up it's on the first tab, and it's on the front page in the content. You can just scroll down and find out where it says Getting Started. It's under Learning and Attention Issues. Scroll down just a little bit. Not showed up in that view, but I think if it's on your desktop, you'll see it right under Learning and Attention Issues. And it's got a lot of really great basic information, and it helps dispel a lot of the myths. And it's actually a lot of great information for talking to your friends, your family, people at school about these issues. So definitely check that out. Laura, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, absolutely. No matter what score you got, the most important thing is that you're here and you're participating in this webinar. And so that means that you're on the right track. There's just so much to learn. We had understood we learn more every day, and we learn a lot from you. So please, please continue to send in your questions via social media and through our community. And I would just encourage you to keep checking out these live events. We have a lot of expert chats coming up, and during which you'll be able to learn about all kinds of topics, including technology, including dyslexia, ADHD. So please keep an eye on our calendar. And then I think that with that, we're finished with the webinar. So I just want to say thank you to Andrew for guiding us through this. I think you did a wonderful job. And I hope that everyone had a good time. So we're going to sign off, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everybody.